one of the criminal defense attorneys of Sean Diddy Combs. As the convicted rap mogul awaits sentencing in federal court and a decision on whether he'll actually be released from jail before sentencing. Oh, and by the way, there's also talk that he may get a pardon from the president. Yeah, all this going on. I get the chance to actually discuss what has been happening behind the scenes with Diddy's lawyer, Alexandra Shapiro.
The courtroom was stunned. You could feel the tension in the air, the disbelief settling into the walls like smoke. After weeks of bombshell testimonies, after piles of evidence and hours of brutal cross-examinations.
We're about to do something that we've never done here on Sidebar. For a show that has covered every aspect of Sean Diddy Combs' criminal case, we are about to speak with one of his defense attorneys, Alexandra Shapiro. She is part of his legal team at trial. And the trial, by the way, that ended with Combs acquitted of the most serious charges: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking. He was convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. They call these the Mann Act violations, moving women and men across state lines for the purposes of commercial sex work. Now, we have talked about Alexandra Shapiro before. She was the attorney, for example, who argued for admitting that video of rape accuser Mia wishing Combs a happy birthday after the alleged assault. She played a key role in this case. And with questions about could Combs' convictions be thrown out, what could he be sentenced to, will he make bail before he's sentenced, can he get a presidential pardon, this feels like a great opportunity to get some insight into all this and certain aspects of the trial, like why didn't they call Christina Courtroom? All right, so let me get right into it. I am joined right now by Alexandra Shapiro herself. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here on Sidebar. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I have a lot of things I want to get into. We will talk about all the latest developments. But first of all, I got to ask, what was it like to be part of a team like this one? Because you know, every argument, every question, it is going to be focused, debated on a national, maybe an international stage. This is a major case. And also, by the way, you were representing somebody and are representing somebody who for the past 2 years has taken quite a hit in the media and wasn't the most popular figure in the last 2 years. So to be representing Sean Combs in this massive trial, what was it like for you?
I mean, it was actually an amazing experience. First of all, the team was fantastic. I mean, I've never worked with so many great lawyers with different talents meshing together. And it was great after I've been working on this case since last September, dealing with the client being just bashed in the media, bashed by a ton of frivolous civil lawsuits that just sort of whipped up the hysteria against him. It was great to finally be able to help him have his day in court. And so the actual witnesses could be heard, and we had a chance to really expose a lot of the truth of what was really behind all of this.
Obviously, this is a win, right? He was acquitted of the most serious charges that he was facing. Did there ever become a time, though, during the course of the trial, maybe in the first several weeks, when you're like, I'm a little nervous, I think he may get convicted of racketeering or sex trafficking, or you were confident throughout the prosecution's case that they just weren't reaching their burden?
Well, we felt good about the trial most of the time.
The verdict was finally in, guilty. The whisper spread like wildfire. For many watching this trial unfold, it felt like justice had finally caught up with one of the industry's most untouchable figures. But just when it seemed like the story had reached its climax, Diddy's lawyer dropped a statement so bold, so outrageous, it sent shockwaves through the entire courtroom. According to him, Diddy's release is just days away. Let that sink in. The man who's been at the center of some of the most disturbing allegations the entertainment world has ever seen. The man whose empire was built on glitz, glamour, and, allegedly, control, manipulation, and silence. The man who just faced a guilty verdict. His legal team is now claiming he's not only walking free, but he's doing it soon. This isn't just arrogance, it's strategy, and it reveals a lot about the kind of power players Diddy still has behind him. Even as the walls close in, his lawyer, calm and calculated, stood before the court and made it crystal clear, this fight isn't over. According to him, the guilty verdict was just one part of a much larger legal chessboard.
A federal crime. Is it a mixture of both? Just trying to understand what the argument was.
I mean, I think it was a mixture. It depended on the witness. And a lot of the witnesses were telling the truth, but the truth didn't hurt Sean. It helped him. There were some people who were shading the truth. The great thing about it was there was a ton of evidence in written communications that people had created at the time, all these text messages, there were videos, and that really helped us expose the truth, because these were things that had been recorded this is what people were, the girlfriends, others were saying to Sean at the time of the events in question. And so, there was really no way for the witnesses or the government to hide what was in the written documents.
Now, I will tell you, if you had been following what we've been doing here on Sidebar, Law and Crime, we call balls and strikes. So there were, during the course of the trial, we would say, this was the strength of the prosecution, this was the strength of the defense. There was such effective cross-examination of these key witnesses that we all kind of wondered, was the defense going to call any witnesses? And you really did. And what was that decision? Because I understand there were witnesses who were planning to be called. There was an idea to put forward a defense case. There was a choice not to do that. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that strategy was about?
Sure. I mean, you always have to be ready to put on a case. At the end of the day, what it comes down to at the end of the government's case is how well do you feel it went in for us? And it's always risky to put on a defense case. People don't realize that, but there's always two sides to everything. And if you put on a witness, and even if it's, 70% good, if the prosecution scores some points, it can really undermine you. And so if you feel like the government's case has gone in really well for you, it can be actually riskier to call any witnesses. People don't necessarily realize that. But at the end of the day, we just made a decision that we thought the case had come in well, and we didn't want to, sort of change the dynamic in a way that could be risky for us.
Was Christina Courtroom ever potentially going to be called by the defense? We were all shocked why the government never chose to call her, since, her name came up almost every single day through almost every witness. Was there a plan by the defense to call her?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into specific plans or non-plans, but it was more of an overall decision just not to put anyone on and just to use a few pieces of evidence that hadn't come in.
What do you think about the prosecution's choice not to call her? Because I will tell you, we did lunchtime shows, live shows with our audience. I would say 80% of the questions that we got during 7 weeks of testimony was, why is she not being called and will she be called? Were you surprised the prosecution chose not to call who was supposed to be the main alleged co-conspirator?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that she would have been a double-edged sword for them, and they probably didn't want to take the risk. As you saw during the trial, even a number of the witnesses that they had always planned to call, that they did put in, kind of blew up in their faces or had positive things to say about Sean that maybe they weren't anticipating. And so it would have been pretty risky for them to put Christina Courtroom on the stand, I think.
There was so much being said about your client in that trial, obviously in the media, facing a number of different lawsuits. We also wondered whether or not he, and it's his decision alone, whether he wanted to take the stand and give his story.
And they're already making moves to overturn, delay, or manipulate the next phase of the process. Appeals, legal loopholes, potential settlements. The message was loud and clear: don't count Diddy out just yet. Now let's be real. The fact that this is even possible shows you how deep the corruption runs. For any ordinary person, a guilty verdict in a case like this would mean one thing: immediate consequences. But when you're worth hundreds of millions, when you spent decades cultivating power, influence, and silence, the rules start to bend. The system starts to work in your favor, and that's exactly what we're seeing unfold here. Diddy's entire defense team has been playing the long game from the beginning. They weren't just fighting the charges, they were controlling the narrative, downplaying the severity, casting doubt on the witnesses, framing it as a smear campaign. And now, even after the court has spoken, they're still spinning, still manipulating, still trying to protect the legacy of a man whose entire empire is built on illusion. The courtroom reaction said it all: gasps, murmurs, reporters frantically texting their editors. No one expected this move, not so soon, and not so confidently, because this wasn't just a claim, it was a declaration of power, a flex. Diddy's lawyer didn't walk into that room to beg for leniency. He walked in to remind everyone that Diddy still has pull, that even with a guilty verdict hanging over him like a noose, he might not spend a single real day behind bars. And that's what's got everyone talking, not just the verdict.
His story, give his version of events. Obviously, there are a ton of risks that come with putting a defendant on the stand, but it would be his choice. Was there a conversation about that?
Well, I mean, I can't get into, attorney-client privilege conversations. Obviously he thought about it. decided not to. And, as I indicated earlier, we thought the case had gone in really well for us. And so we liked where we were. So that was basically the decision.
Now, the big news, some of the big news, a lot of big news came out after the trial, was the firing of Maureen Comey, the lead prosecutor in this case. Now, there's obviously a political angle to it. There are comments that she has made. But I have to ask, you going head to head against her for so many weeks, months and before that, the firing of her, what did you make of that?
I think it was unfortunate. She's a very well-respected prosecutor. We had good sort of professional relationships with her during the course of the trial. And, I don't really think it had anything to do with the trial, but I can't really say anything beyond that. It just,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. Let's talk about something we can get into quite a bit. Let's talk bail. Okay, so we did a previous sidebar breaking down the defense's renewed motion for release, several arguments for why Sean Combs, should be released on bail pending sentencing, acquitted of the most serious charges. There's no comparable case of someone who is convicted of the Mann Act alone and not engaging in sex trafficking or a prostitution for financial gain, and they would be locked up like this. Talked about the issues plaguing the MDC, how it is dangerous, how he's not a risk of flight, not a danger to the community. But do you think Judge Arun Subramanian is going to be persuaded by your letter, by your motion? Because obviously he specifically highlighted after the verdict your client's violence, how the defense asserted at trial that Combs was violent. Do you think he's going to have a change of opinion now based upon the legal papers?
Well, I think we certainly hope so. And, as we pointed out in the papers, the unfortunate violence that occurred was mostly a really long time ago, other than the one incident in June that Jane testified to, which was kind of unusual. They had been together for 3 years. There had been no violence, and she essentially started the fight. I'm not excusing anything, but it was kind of a one-off. And I think the government really hadn't put in any evidence of any recent violence. The Intercontinental video, remember, that was almost 10 years ago. He broke up with Cassie in 2018. And in our reply papers yesterday, we submitted a letter from Gina Hyun, who was one of the alleged victims, a different ex-girlfriend. And I think it was a pretty powerful letter about how Sean has changed, how she's not concerned about violence. She thinks he should be released on bail. So we're hoping that that will persuade the judge, given everything else, particularly, as you noted, like the really, really unusual nature of this particular Mann Act conviction and the fact that he's already been in prison, or jail rather, for like 11 months. This case is a one-off to begin with, but we're not aware of any case like this with a Mann Act conviction where anyone's done that much time to begin with. So.
And prosecutors, I'm imagining, have come back or will come back and say, well, listen, look, after the raids.
But what it actually means, is this justice? Or is this just another rich man buying his freedom? Because let's not forget, this trial wasn't about petty crimes. This was about disturbing behavior, systemic abuse, and a network of power that enabled it all for decades. This was about victims finally being heard. And now, even after all that, the man at the center of it is already planning his return. And here's the kicker. The legal system has already shown signs of cracking under this pressure. There are whispers of backroom deals, judges with connections, delays that just seem a little too convenient. And all of it feeds into the same ugly truth: the system protects the powerful. Diddy knows that. His lawyers know that. And they're exploiting it at every turn. But here's what they're not prepared for: the public has changed. This isn't the early 2000s. This isn't an era where scandals get buried under tabloid fluff. This is 2025, where every move is watched, dissected, and exposed online within minutes.
Stated to the court, and remember, they haven't been successful in the past, that he voluntarily came to New York last year to surrender himself to authorities, that he gave up his passport to his attorneys 6 months before his arrest, paid off his mortgage on his Miami home so it was free and clear for him to stay at while out on bond. He was just acquitted of the most serious charges that he was facing, which, by the way, carried decades, if not life in prison, that he's not a risk of flight. That's the basic argument. Now, when it comes to the danger argument, That is key. Why? Judge Subramanian had said after the verdict that the reason he was denying bail was because of Combs' violence, that his own attorneys admitted he was violent during the course of the trial. Well, here is what Combs' defense attorneys argue about that. Quote, the court noted that the defense admitted a history of domestic violence as to Miss Ventura and that he struck Jane twice in June 2024. However, we strenuously object that Mr. Combs poses a danger to the community, aside from a single instance on June 18, 2024, where Mr. Combs was provoked by Jane through her own acts of violence. There was no evidence of any acts of violence in the last 7 years. Indeed, the jury notably rejected the government's argument that the June 2024 incident constituted coercion when it acquitted Mr. Combs of the sex trafficking charge. Also, prior to his arrest in this case, Mr. Combs enrolled in a domestic violence program in which he participated until he was arrested and incarcerated in connection with this case. If released on conditions, Sean Combs will not be violent to anyone. As we said in court, this jury gave him his life back, and he will not squander his second chance at life, nor would he do anything to further jeopardize his 7 children not having a father and 4 of his children not having a parent at all. The court can fashion any set of conditions, and Mr. Combs will abide by any condition to make the court comfortable that Mr. Combs will not be violent toward any person. And that is when they propose the following bail package: that Combs will sign a $50 million bond secured by his home in Miami, that the bond will be co-signed by 3 financially responsible people, that Combs will reside in his home in Miami, that his travel will be limited to the Southern District of Florida, the Southern District of New York for attorney meetings, as well as airports that are necessary to travel between the two, that he will be placed under the express supervision of the U.S. Pretrial Services Agency, that he will report to that agency as directed, that his passport will be surrendered to pretrial services, that he shall not apply for any other passport, and they even highlight that the court can add other conditions too: home detention, private security approved by the court, mental health treatment. He'll agree to it all. Now, let me tell you, we kind of previewed that this all would happen, this argument would happen, this new bail package would be presented when we spoke a few weeks ago to renowned bail bondsman, to the celebrities, by the way, to the stars, Ira Judelson, who apparently had been working with Combs' team behind the scenes on working to secure his release. Here's what he said about a new package after the verdict.
When Mark reached out to me afterwards, we started thinking about putting another bail package together.
And what is that bail package and by the way, is this a bail package that you think could be submitted again even after the judge just denied bail?
The court of public opinion is real, and right now, it's turning fast. Diddy's brand is bleeding, his businesses are under fire, his peers are going silent, and while his legal team might be celebrating a potential technical win, the damage is already done, because even if he walks free, he's not walking clean. His name will forever be tied to this trial, to these accusations, to this fall from grace. And you better believe 50 Cent is watching this unfold with a front row seat. He's been relentless in calling out the industry's hypocrisy, the fake friendships, the silence, the protect the circle mentality that's kept men like Diddy safe for far too long. If Diddy somehow walks free despite a guilty verdict, 50 won't let that slide. He'll use it as more fuel, more proof that the system isn't just broken, it's rigged. What we're witnessing isn't just the fall of a mogul, it's the unraveling of an entire era. An era where image was everything and accountability was optional.
They were paying people, they were hiring people, they were sending me pictures even when Diddy wasn't around. They were asking me to come over even when Diddy wasn't around. These were what these witnesses were telling me, which is really Brady evidence. And I don't know if that was ever turned over. But the more interesting argument is that all these counts were charged. The only thing he was convicted of were the Mann Acts. And he probably wouldn't have been convicted of these Mann Acts, but for all this other stuff that came in to try and prove these counts that they could not prove and did not have a basis for bringing.
Let me just challenge you on that, because this is a jury who didn't find that there was sex trafficking. And I can't confirm that they found him guilty of the Mann Act because of the hotel video or anything else. I mean, it seems to me that they might have convicted him on that based on the travel records, the payment receipts, all about that. Not even necessarily allegations of violence. I mean, do you think that it was because of, let's say, the Intercontinental Hotel video that he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution? It always felt to me that they proved that charge based purely on, the documents.
Well, I always feel like during a trial, whenever you get a guilty verdict on one of the counts or two of the counts out of 6 or 7, you think to yourself, is it because of these other things that they brought up? How bad he is, he's not a good guy, the video came out. Sometimes juries will split the baby, meaning, there's people that want to convict, there's people that don't want to convict, and they're like, okay, let's convict him on these acts. We can all agree we can convict him on these acts. He's not a good guy. He transported these men across state lines. Let's convict him on this. There's always going to be a question of that. The only way to not have a question of that, obviously, is when the jury comes out, someone gives an interview and says, hey, this is why we did it, is because, this tape was so bad and these other incidents were so bad that we were like, we can't just let him walk with nothing. So we convicted him on the Mann Acts. Now, we don't have a juror saying that. Do I think eventually jurors are going to start coming out? Yeah, I think so. I think some of these jurors are going to come out. They're going to want to do some interviews, not before sentencing. And I think after sentencing, I think some of them will come out and we'll discuss it, because I think that was the feeling I was getting from this jury and the reactions they had to Comey's closing, and even the reaction just in general to the 5 or the 6 U.S. attorney team. I think their reactions in general were very noticeable, and I think that this is a jury that wants to talk to people once I think he gets sentenced.
Okay, so now let's move on to the pardon discussion. So if he can't get relief from the court in getting the conviction thrown out or a new trial, can he get relief through a pardon? Before we talk about, is this a real thing, what is the process to even obtain a federal pardon? How do you even go about that?
Sure. So it's a pardon or a commutation. If someone is actually in custody, they could also get a commutation, which does not wipe the crime off your record. It just allows you to get out of jail. So he has that option to give him a commutation. If he gets sentenced, he can also give him a commutation. But as for the process, there's an application on the DOJ website, and I'm part of some charities that also do a lot of pro bono work for pardons and commutations. You can fill out this form, DOJ website. It essentially lists the reasons why you should get a pardon, what kind of community service you've done, things of that nature. There's a separate application for a commutation, but you can file a pardon application, and you could also say, hey, listen, if it's not a pardon, I'm looking for a commutation. You attach your indictment, you would reasons why you feel your crime was.
An era where money silenced victims and power erased consequences. But that era is dying, slowly, messily, and very publicly. And Diddy's trial is the final nail in the coffin. Unless, of course, he walks, because if he does, it sends a message to every survivor, every whistleblower, every person who ever thought about speaking out. It doesn't matter. You can scream the truth, you can fight the fight, but the rich and powerful still win. That's what's at stake here, not just one man's freedom, but the integrity of the entire justice system. If Diddy is released days after a guilty verdict, what does that say about justice in America? About accountability in the entertainment industry? About the value of truth? People are angry, and rightfully so, because this case was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be the one that broke the cycle, the one that proved no one is above the law. But if Diddy's lawyer is right, if he walks free in a matter of days, then we're back at square one, and maybe worse. The courtroom might have gone quiet after that statement, but the streets haven't, the internet hasn't, the people haven't. This story isn't over, not by a long shot. And if Diddy thinks he's reclaiming his throne, he better think again, because the world is watching now, closely, critically, and they won't forget. So go ahead, Diddy, celebrate your legal technicalities, smile for the cameras, but just know, your reputation, your legacy, your empire, it's never going back to what it was. And if your release does come in a few days, it won't be a victory, it'll be a stain. A permanent mark on a career that was already cracking. The verdict said guilty, the people said enough, and no amount of money, lawyers, or spin can change that.